The alarm didn't go off. Or maybe it did, and Olivia just hit snooze too many times. Either way, she woke up with a jolt, her heart racing as she saw the time, 7:48 a.m. Her interview was at 9:30 downtown, and she lived in the suburbs. On a good day, that was cutting it close. Not today, she groaned, throwing off her covers. Not this interview. Olivia had been job hunting for 3 months. After getting laid off from her marketing position at a company that restructured, which really meant the CEO's nephew needed a job, she'd sent out 87 applications. This interview at Innovate Solutions was the first one that actually matched her experience and offered a salary that wouldn't leave her eating ramen every night. She rushed through her morning routine, skipping breakfast but not her coffee. Some sacrifices weren't worth making. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied mascara, thinking about the questions she'd prepared for. Innovate Solutions was known for their tough interviews, but also for treating their employees like actual humans. A rare combination these days. The sky outside was gray and heavy with clouds that couldn't decide whether to rain or just threaten all day. Olivia grabbed her umbrella just in case and threw it into her bag alongside her portfolio. 15 pages of her best work, printed on the fancy paper that cost her half a day's grocery budget. Her ancient Honda Civic greeted her with its usual reluctance, the engine turning over 3 times before catching. "Come on, Betty," she muttered to the dashboard. "Just one more important day, that's all I'm asking." The car shuddered to life, and Olivia backed out of her apartment complex, checking her GPS. If traffic was kind, she'd make it with 20 minutes to spare, enough time to find parking, compose herself, and review her notes one last time. Traffic was not kind. 10 minutes into her drive, the skies opened up. Not a gentle spring shower, but the kind of rain that seemed personally offended by windshield wipers. Olivia leaned forward, squinting through the blur, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It's fine," she told herself. "You're still on schedule." Deep breaths. The radio announcer's voice crackled through her speakers. "And if you're heading downtown this morning, you might want to find an alternate route. An accident on Highway 16 has traffic backed up for miles." Olivia's stomach dropped. Highway 16 was her route. She glanced at her GPS, which was already flashing red lines ahead. According to the new estimate, she'd be 15 minutes late. No, she muttered, taking the next exit. She knew a shortcut through some side streets. It would be tight, but she could still make it. The shortcut took her past the old mill district, an area being transformed into upscale apartments and offices. Construction had been going on for months, turning the roads into an obstacle course of detours and single lanes. As she navigated around a particularly large puddle, Betty made a sound no car should ever make. A high-pitched whine followed by a series of alarming clunks. The check engine light blinked on, then all the dashboard lights joined the party. "Not now, Betty, please, not now." Olivia patted the dashboard like it was a pet that needed reassurance. The car responded by shuddering once more before the engine died completely. She coasted to the side of the road, putting on her hazard lights more out of habit than hope they would work. Rain hammered on the roof as she pulled out her phone. No rideshare cars available for at least 20 minutes. A quick calculation told her she'd definitely miss her interview if she waited. The Innovate Solutions building was visible in the distance, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, maybe a mile away. Without giving herself time to reconsider, Olivia grabbed her bag, tucked her portfolio inside her coat, and stepped out into the downpour. The rain soaked through her carefully chosen blazer in seconds. Her hair, which she'd spent 30 minutes straightening, instantly reverted to its natural curly state. But she kept moving, her sensible heels splashing through puddles as she power-walked toward her future. That's when she saw it, the construction site blocking her path. The sidewalk was closed with signs directing pedestrians to cross the street. But crossing meant an extra 10 minutes she didn't have. Through the site was a straight shot to the tower. Olivia hesitated for only a moment before ducking under the caution tape. "Sorry," she mumbled to nobody in particular. "Job interview emergency." The site was a mess of mud, equipment, and half-finished foundations. She picked her way carefully between piles of materials, trying to stay on planks of wood where possible. It might have worked if not for the worker who spotted her. "Hey, you can't be in here," he called out, waving from under his hard hat. Startled, Olivia stepped backward, right into a pit of mud that swallowed her right leg up to the knee. "Oh," she gasped. the cold shock making her lose balance. She reached out to steady herself, but her hand found only more mud. Before she knew it, she was scrambling up, both hands now covered in thick clay-like mud that seemed determined to claim her as part of the construction site. The worker jogged over. "You okay, miss?" His concerned face quickly turned to confusion. "What are you doing here dressed like that?" Olivia looked down at herself. Her navy blue suit was now decorated with artistic splashes and smears of brownish-red mud. Her white blouse had not been spared. Her portfolio bag was miraculously still somewhat clean, protected by her body during the fall. "I have an interview," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, "at Innovate Solutions. In 20 minutes." The worker's eyes widened. He looked at her, then at the tower, then back at her mud-covered form. To his credit, he didn't laugh. "Listen, the fastest way is through there." He pointed to a narrow path between two supply trailers. "It'll put you right at the back entrance. But you're gonna need this." He handed her his own hard hat. "Site rules. And maybe it'll keep some of the rain off." "Thank you," Olivia said, taking the yellow helmet with muddy fingers. "I really appreciate it." "Good luck with the interview," he called as she carefully made her way between the trailers. "You've got a good story to tell, at least." "A story? Yes. That's one way to put it," she thought. The back entrance led to a service corridor which eventually connected to the main lobby. Olivia paused at the threshold, suddenly aware of what she must look like. Through the glass doors, she could see people in immaculate business attire crossing the polished marble floor. Security guards stood at attention. A fountain played musically in the center of the space, and here she was, dripping mud and rainwater, wearing a construction hard hat. For a brief, cowardly moment, she considered turning around. Going home, sending an email about a family emergency, pretending this day never happened. But 3 months of rejection emails flashed through her mind. The dwindling balance in her bank account. The way her mother's voice had softened with worry when Olivia said she might need to move back home, just for a little while. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and pushed through the doors. The security guard's eyes widened comically as she approached. "Ma'am, do you need medical assistance?" "No, thank you," Olivia said, summoning every ounce of dignity she could muster. "I have an interview with Innovate Solutions at 9:30. My name is Olivia Reeves." The guard looked like he wasn't sure whether to call for backup or burst out laughing. He chose neither, instead pointing toward the reception desk. 15th floor. You'll need to sign in first." The marble floor betrayed her with every step, leaving behind muddy footprints that made her wince. Conversation stopped as she passed. A man in an expensive suit actually took a step back to avoid her, as if mud might be contagious. The receptionist, a young man with carefully styled hair and a crisp white shirt, looked up as she approached. To his credit, his professional smile only faltered for a second. "Good morning," he said, his eyes darting from her face to her mud-caked clothes and back again. "How can I help you?" "I have an interview at 9:30, Olivia said, suddenly aware that she was still wearing the hard hat. She quickly removed it, which only made things worse as her rain-soaked hair tumbled down. "Olivia Reeves for the marketing director position." The receptionist checked his computer, fingers tapping efficiently. "Yes, I see you here. You're actually a few minutes early." He glanced up again, taking in her appearance with newfound curiosity. "Would you like to use our restroom before your interview?" "Yes, please," Olivia said, relief washing over her. "That would be wonderful." He pointed toward a hallway. "First door on the right. I'll let Mr. Reed know you're here." In the elegant bathroom with its soft lighting and marble countertops, Olivia finally got a good look at herself. It was worse than she'd imagined. Mud streaked her face like war paint. Her once white blouse was now a canvas of brown splatters. Her blazer was beyond saving. Even her carefully manicured nails were rimmed with dirt. Using paper towels and hand soap, she did what she could. The mud on her face came off easily enough, but her clothes were a lost cause. She managed to clean most of it from her hands, letting her see the small cut on her palm she hadn't even noticed getting. "It's fine," she told her reflection, trying to believe it. "They're interviewing you for your brain, not your clothes." But as she stared at herself, a strange calm settled over her. This was so far beyond a normal bad day that it had crossed into the absurd. She started to laugh, quietly at first, then with genuine amusement at the ridiculousness of her situation. By the time she walked back to reception, she had made peace with her appearance. She couldn't fix it, so she might as well own it. The receptionist looked up with a sympathetic smile. Mr. Reed will see you now. 15th floor, suite 1520. As the elevator doors closed, Olivia took a deep breath and straightened her mud-caked blazer. Whatever happened next? She had a feeling this was an interview neither she nor Innovate Solutions would forget anytime soon. The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave Olivia exactly 23 seconds to prepare herself. She used them wisely, taking deep breaths and rehearsing her opening lines. The portfolio in her bag was still intact, a small miracle she was clinging to like a life raft. When the doors opened, she stepped into a reception area that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. Sleek white furniture sat on polished concrete floors. Living plants cascaded from modern planters. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Now shrouded in rain clouds that matched Olivia's mood, a woman with impeccable posture sat behind a curved desk, her fingers dancing across a keyboard. She looked up as Olivia approached, and the subtle widening of her eyes was the only indication that she noticed anything unusual. "Good morning," the receptionist said, her voice as smooth as her perfectly styled bob. "How may I help you?" "I'm Olivia Reeves. I have an interview with Mr. Reed at 9:30. The receptionist nodded. "Of course. Please have a seat. Mr. Reed is finishing up a call. He'll be with you shortly." Olivia turned toward the waiting area, painfully aware of the muddy footprints she was leaving on the concrete floor. 3 other people were already seated, all in pristine business attire, all staring at their phones with practiced nonchalance. She chose a chair slightly apart from the others, hoping to contain her mess to one area. As she sat down, the white fabric of the chair made contact with her mud-caked pants and she winced. The cleaning bill for this place would probably exceed her monthly rent. A young man in a charcoal suit glanced up from his phone, did a double take, then quickly looked back down. The woman beside him, wearing a burgundy dress that probably cost more than Olivia's car, didn't even try to hide her stare. "Rough morning?" she asked, one perfectly shaped eyebrow raised. Olivia considered her options. She could make up a lie. She could ignore the question. Or she could own it. "You could say that," she replied, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. "My car broke down in the rain, and I had to cut through a construction site to get here on time." The woman's expression shifted from judgment to something like respect. Dedicated. "I like that." The third person, an older man with silver temples, lowered his tablet. "Are you interviewing with Thomas Reed?" he asked. Olivia nodded. "Then he'll appreciate the effort," he said with a knowing smile. "Reed has a thing about punctuality. Says it shows respect for other people's time." A small wave of relief washed over Olivia. At least she'd gotten that part right. The burgundy dress woman leaned forward. "I'm Diane Howard, VP of Operations. This is Jack Chen, our legal counsel." She nodded toward the young man, who gave a small wave. "And that's Philip Vaughn, Chief Financial Officer." Olivia blinked. She wasn't just sitting with other interview candidates. These were executives. Top-level management. "Nice to meet you all," she managed, suddenly aware of every speck of mud on her clothing. "I'm Olivia Reeves. I'm interviewing for the marketing director position." "Ah," Diane said, exchanging glances with Philip. "That explains why Thomas wanted us all here this morning. He's been particular about this hire." Jack glanced at his watch. "Speaking of Thomas, he's running late." "That's unusual." "Board call," Philip explained. "Quarterly numbers. You know how it goes." They all nodded knowingly, while Olivia tried to look like someone who regularly dealt with board calls and quarterly numbers. A few uncomfortable moments passed. Olivia could feel her clothes starting to dry, the mud hardening and cracking in places. Her hair had begun to frizz in that special way that only happened on important days. She tried to smooth it down, then realized her hands were still dirty and probably making things worse. "So," Diane said, breaking the silence. "Tell us about yourself, Olivia. Where were you before this?" The question caught her off guard. Was this part of the interview? Were they evaluating her already? "I was at Wilson Media for 3 years," she said, deciding honesty was her only option at this point. "I led their digital marketing team until the company downsized 2 months ago." "Wilson Media," Philip repeated, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Weren't they just acquired by Green Tech?" Olivia nodded. "Yes, and the new management brought in their own team." "Politics," Jack said with a sympathetic grimace. "Nothing personal, just business, right?" That's what they said in the layoff email, Olivia replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into her voice. Diane laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to lighten the air around them. At least they emailed. I once had a boss who laid people off via text message. On Christmas Eve. No way, Jack said, looking appalled. Way, Diane confirmed. The tech industry can be brutal. The conversation shifted into war stories about terrible bosses and corporate mishaps. Olivia found herself relaxing slightly, even contributing a few stories of her own. These executives were actually human. They laughed at her jokes. They commiserated about the state of the job market. For a few minutes, she almost forgot she looked like she'd been mud wrestling before breakfast. Then the elevator doors opened, and the energy in the room instantly changed. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and intense eyes stepped out, moving with the kind of purposeful stride that parted crowds. He wore no tie with his crisp white shirt and navy suit, a small rebellion that somehow made him seem more authoritative, not less. Thomas Reed had arrived. The executive straightened almost imperceptibly. Philip closed his tablet. Diane smoothed her already perfect dress. Thomas scanned the room, his gaze landing briefly on each person before settling on Olivia. His eyebrows rose just slightly, the only indication that he noticed anything unusual about her appearance. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Sorry to keep you waiting. The board had questions." "The board always has questions." He smiled, a quick flash that transformed his serious face. The executives murmured their good mornings. Olivia tried to stand, then realized her pants had partially dried and were now stuck to the chair. She discreetly tried to peel herself free. Thomas approached, extending his hand to her, apparently unconcerned about the mud. "You must be Olivia Reeves." "I'm Thomas Reed." Olivia looked at her dirty hand, then at his immaculate one. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Reed, but I should warn you, I'm not exactly clean at the moment." Thomas laughed. "I noticed. And please call me Thomas." He kept his hand extended, unwavering. Olivia gave in and shook it, leaving a faint smudge on his skin that he didn't seem to mind. "I appreciate punctuality," he said, checking his watch, "especially when it clearly wasn't easy." "My grandmother always said being on time is a way of showing respect," Olivia replied, though she probably didn't anticipate this. She gestured at her mud-covered self. "Wise woman, your grandmother," Thomas said with a nod. Then addressing everyone, "Shall we get started? I thought we'd use the Horizon conference room for this discussion." Discussion? Olivia had expected a standard interview, her across a desk from Thomas, maybe with HR present. Not whatever this was shaping up to be. She finally managed to unstick herself from the chair, wincing at the soft ripping sound her pants made. The executives gathered their things and Thomas led the way down a corridor lined with glass-walled offices. People looked up from their desks as the group passed, their curious gazes lingering on Olivia. The Horizon room turned out to be aptly named. 3 walls were glass, offering views of the city in all its rainy glory. A long table occupied the center, with a digital display covering the 4th wall. "Please, everyone, have a seat," Thomas said, taking his place at the head of the table. "Olivia, why don't you sit here?" He indicated the chair to his right, traditionally the power position in a meeting. Diane raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she took a seat across from Olivia. Jack and Philip filled in the remaining chairs near Thomas, while several empty seats remained at the far end of the table. Olivia carefully sat down, trying not to transfer too much mud to the expensive-looking chair. "Before we begin formally," Thomas said, "I'm curious, Olivia, what happened this morning?" "The full story, if you don't mind." All eyes turned to her. This wasn't in any interview prep guide she'd ever read. Olivia took a deep breath and decided that at this point, the truth was her only option. "My alarm didn't go off. Or I snoozed it too many times, to be honest. I woke up late, rushed to get ready, and then got caught in the downpour. There was an accident on Highway 16, so I tried to take a shortcut through the old mill district." Thomas nodded, seemingly familiar with the area. "My car broke down about a mile from here. No rideshares were available in time, so I decided to walk. There was a construction site blocking the direct path, but crossing the street would have added 10 minutes I didn't have. So I cut through." "Trespassed," Jack corrected, though his tone was amused rather than accusatory. "Technically, yes," Olivia admitted. "A worker spotted me. I stepped backward into a mud pit and..." She gestured at herself. Here we are. Here we are indeed, Thomas repeated thoughtfully, studying her with those intense eyes. Instead of the dismissal or pity she expected, she saw something else entirely. Interest. Maybe even approval. Most people, he said slowly, would have called to reschedule when their car broke down, or at the very least when they fell into a mud pit. The thought crossed my mind, Olivia confessed, but this opportunity is too important to miss over something like bad weather and a bit of mud. Thomas leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. A bit of mud, he repeated. I like your perspective, Olivia. Now let's talk about why you're here. He tapped something on the table, and the display wall came to life, showing Olivia's resume in larger-than-life detail. Your background is impressive, Thomas continued, but so are the backgrounds of the other 5 candidates we've interviewed. What I want to know, what we all want to know, is what makes you different. What makes you someone who would walk through a construction site in the rain, rather than miss this meeting? The question hung in the air. Olivia realized with sudden clarity that this wasn't just about her qualifications anymore. This was about who she was as a person, how she handled adversity, what she was made of underneath the professional veneer, or in this case, underneath the mud. And for the first time since her alarm didn't go off that morning, Olivia felt a surge of confidence. Because if there was one thing today had proven, it was that she didn't give up easily. She straightened in her chair, mud and all, and began to tell them exactly what made her different. Olivia took a moment to gather her thoughts. The room was silent except for the gentle patter of rain against the windows. The executives watched her with curious expressions, not hostile, but certainly evaluating her every move. What makes me different, she began, is that I see marketing as more than just campaigns and metrics. I see it as storytelling with purpose. She paused, then decided to take a risk. And if you don't mind me saying, today I'm living proof that sometimes the most memorable stories come from unexpected places. Thomas's mouth quirked up at one corner. Go on. At Wilson Media, our clients often came to us wanting to look perfect, polished. But I found that the campaigns that really connected with people were the ones that showed authenticity. The ones that weren't afraid to get a little messy. She glanced down at her mud-caked clothes with a self-deprecating smile. Diane nodded slowly. Authenticity is certainly a buzzword these days. It's more than a buzzword when it's genuine, Olivia countered. People can tell the difference. Take your recent campaign for the Greenspace app, for example. The executives exchanged surprised glances. You've done your homework, Philip noted. Of course, Olivia said. The campaign was beautiful, but it felt distant. All those perfect people in perfect homes with perfect plants. She hesitated, aware she was criticizing their work, but pressed on. What if instead you showed real people killing plants, overwatering them, forgetting about them, and then finally succeeding with help from the app? That's a story people relate to because it's true to life. Thomas leaned forward, interest sharpening his gaze. And how would you measure the success of such an approach? This was familiar territory. Olivia reached for her bag, then paused. May I? At Thomas's nod, she carefully extracted her portfolio, relieved to see it had survived mostly unscathed. She opened it to a page of graphs and charts. At Wilson, we tracked traditional engagement metrics, but we also developed what we called a conversation index. We measured how often people actually talked about our campaigns in organic ways. Social mentions that weren't hashtag-driven, unsolicited emails, even focus groups where we simply asked, what ads do you remember seeing this month? Jack raised an eyebrow. And that worked better than standard metrics? It complemented them, Olivia explained. Traditional metrics tell you if people saw your message. The conversation index tells you if they cared about it. She flipped to another page, aware that her dirty fingerprints were marking the edges but pushing forward anyway. This campaign for Westbrook Coffee increased their sales by 23% in regions where we use the authentic approach versus 8% in control regions where we use traditional advertising. Thomas studied the page, then looked up at her. These are impressive numbers. But Innovate Solutions isn't selling coffee or plant apps. We're selling enterprise software solutions, not exactly the stuff of emotional storytelling. Here was the challenge Olivia had prepared for. Actually, that's where the opportunity lies, she said. Everyone in your space is selling features and efficiency, but who's talking about the human side? The relief IT managers feel when a system finally works seamlessly, the pride developers feel when they create something elegant with your tools. The way your software actually makes people's work lives better. As she spoke, she grew more animated, momentarily forgetting about the mud and her disheveled appearance. The portfolio pages turned, revealing case studies and concept sketches she'd prepared specifically for this interview. Your competitors are all saying the same things about speed and integration and scalability. But you could be talking about freedom, about creativity, about making Monday mornings less terrible because your software actually does what it promises. Philip chuckled. Making Monday mornings less terrible. That's certainly a unique value proposition. But an honest one, Olivia pointed out. And honesty is memorable. Thomas sat back in his chair, fingers steepled. Let's try something different, he said abruptly. Olivia, if you were in charge of marketing at Innovate Solutions, what would be the first thing you'd change? The question was a curveball, but Olivia decided to stick with honesty. Your website, she said without hesitation. Diane's eyes widened. We just redesigned it 6 months ago. It cost a fortune. And it's beautiful, Olivia assured her. But it's also safe. Corporate. It looks like every other tech company's website. Blue gradients. Stock photos of diverse people looking at screens. Vague promises about transformation. The room was quiet. Olivia wondered if she'd gone too far. Then Thomas laughed. A genuine, full-bodied laugh that transformed his serious face. She's not wrong, he said to the others. Go on, Olivia. What would you do differently? Encouraged, she continued. I'd start with real stories from real customers. Not polished testimonials, but actual problems you solved. Show the before and after. Let people see themselves in those stories. She was on a roll now, her passion overriding her self-consciousness. And I'd change your language. Right now your copy reads like it was written by a committee. Technically accurate, but emotionally flat. People don't buy software. They buy what the software enables them to do, to feel, to become. Olivia flipped to the last page in her portfolio, a mock-up she'd created of how their website could look. It wasn't perfect. She'd made it on her home computer with limited resources, but it conveyed her vision. This is just a rough concept. But imagine opening with a split screen on one side, an IT manager pulling their hair out over a system crash at 2 a.m. On the other, that same person leaving work on time, smiling. Because your software prevented the problem entirely. The executives leaned in to look at her design. Jack's brow furrowed. It's certainly different. Different gets noticed, Olivia said simply. Thomas tapped his fingers on the table, considering. Then he said something unexpected. You're sitting in a meeting with our biggest potential client. They've just told you they hate the campaign concept you spent 3 months developing. What do you do? Olivia blinked at the sudden scenario. First I listen, she said after a moment. Really listen, not just wait for my turn to defend the work. I need to understand what specifically they hate and why. Thomas nodded slightly, encouraging her to continue. Then I look for the common ground. What are they trying to achieve? And how was my concept attempting to get them there? Maybe we agree on the destination but disagree on the route. If so, we can find another path together, right there in the meeting if possible. And if there is no common ground? Diane challenged. There's always common ground, Olivia insisted. At minimum, we both want the client to succeed. If they truly believe my approach won't work for their audience, I need to respect that they know their business. I'd rather pivot and create something new than push something that won't serve them well. Thomas exchanged glances with the other executives, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then he checked his watch. We've kept you for nearly an hour, Olivia. Do you have any questions for us? The traditional end-of-interview question caught her off guard. She had prepared questions, of course, but the unconventional nature of this meeting had addressed many of them already. Just one, she said. Why bring your executive team to a first interview for a marketing director position? That's unusual, to say the least. Thomas smiled. Direct, I appreciate that. He leaned forward. The truth is, we're not just hiring a marketing director. We're revamping our entire approach to how we connect with customers. The person who takes this role will work directly with everyone at this table on a daily basis. They'll have significant influence over the company's direction. We needed to make sure the chemistry was right. Olivia absorbed this information. And is it? She asked boldly. Is the chemistry right? The executives looked at each other again. Philip smiled first, then Diane nodded slightly. Jack shrugged in what seemed like agreement. Thomas stood up, signaling the end of the interview. We'll be in touch very soon, Olivia. Thank you for coming in today, and for your memorable entrance. Olivia gathered her portfolio and stood, suddenly aware again of her mud-encrusted state. Thank you for seeing past the mud, she said sincerely. In my experience, Thomas replied, walking her to the door, it's when things get messy that you really learn what people are made of. As the door closed behind her, Olivia let out a long breath. The interview had gone better than she could have possibly imagined given the circumstances. But whether it was good enough to get the job, that was another question entirely. She made her way back to the elevators, leaving a trail of dried mud flakes in her wake. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished metal. She looked like she'd been through a war zone. She felt like she'd survived one, and somehow, against all odds, she was smiling. As soon as the conference room door closed behind Olivia, Thomas turned to face his executive team. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the gentle drumming of rain against the windows and the faint hum of the building's ventilation system. Well, Thomas said finally, breaking the silence. That was unexpected. Diane let out a small laugh. That's putting it mildly. I've never seen anyone show up to an interview looking like they just participated in a mud run. The question is, Philip said, leaning back in his chair, do we care more about her appearance today or what she brings to the table? Thomas walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. She didn't just bring ideas to the table. She brought courage, determination. He turned to face the group again. When was the last time any of us faced that kind of adversity and didn't just reschedule or call it quits? Jack tapped his pen against his notepad. Her portfolio was impressive. The Westbrook Coffee campaign numbers, if accurate, are nothing to sneeze at, and she clearly did her homework on our products. But she criticized our website, Diane pointed out. The one we just spent $500,000 redesigning. Yes, Thomas said quietly. And she was right. The room fell silent again. Thomas walked back to the table and pulled up the company website on the display wall. They all stared at it. The sleek blue gradients, the stock photos of diverse professionals looking productive, the vague taglines about innovation and transformation. Look at it objectively, Thomas challenged them. Does this tell our story? Does it stand out from our competitors in any meaningful way? Philip frowned. It's professional. It's what clients expect from an enterprise software company. And that's exactly the problem, Thomas countered. We're giving people what they expect instead of what they'll remember. He switched the display to show their main competitor's website. Side by side, the sites looked remarkably similar. If we traded logos, would anyone even notice? The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Look, Thomas continued, we've been losing market share for 3 quarters straight. Our last 2 product launches were solid, but they barely moved the needle. Something isn't working, and it isn't the technology. So a muddy marketer is going to save us? Diane asked, though her tone was more curious than dismissive. Maybe not. But continuing to do the same things while expecting different results certainly won't. Thomas sat down at the head of the table again. I want honest opinions. No politics, no worrying about who supported which decision in the past. Just gut reactions to Olivia Reeves. Jack went first. I like her. She's direct without being abrasive. She came prepared despite everything that went wrong this morning. And she didn't try to oversell herself or make grand promises she can't keep. Philip nodded slowly. She's clearly intelligent and knows her field. I'm not convinced about this conversation index. It sounds a bit soft for my taste. But her traditional metrics were solid. And I appreciate that she was willing to challenge us right out of the gate. All eyes turned to Diane, who was tapping her perfectly manicured nails on the table. She's rough around the edges, she said finally. Not just the mud, her whole approach. She doesn't have the polish of the other candidates. That's true, Thomas acknowledged. Does that matter? Diane thought for a moment. In board meetings? Maybe, with conservative clients. Possibly. A small smile played at her lips. But for shaking things up internally? For bringing a fresh perspective? It might be exactly what we need. Thomas nodded, satisfied. What about the other candidates? Anyone we should reconsider before making a decision? They spent the next 30 minutes reviewing the other interviews. There was the former tech journalist with impressive connections but limited management experience. The internal candidate who knew their products inside out but lacked vision. The agency director with a glossy resume but who had somehow managed to talk for an hour without saying anything memorable. The thing is, Jack said, after they'd gone through the list, I can't remember a single specific idea from any of them. But I can tell you exactly what Olivia proposed for our website, for our messaging, for our approach. The mud probably helped with that, Philip joked. It's not every day someone drips all over our conference room floor. True, Thomas agreed with a chuckle. But it's more than that. She was authentic, and that's exactly what she's proposing for our brand. Diane was scrolling through Olivia's resume on her tablet. She's been out of work for 2 months. That's why she was so determined to make this interview. She needs this job. We all need something, Thomas replied. The question is, does Innovate Solutions need Olivia Reeves? The room fell silent as they considered the question. Outside, the rain had finally stopped and weak sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. I think we do, Jack said finally. But not as marketing director. Thomas raised an eyebrow. No, Jack confirmed. I think we need her in a bigger role. A slow smile spread across Thomas's face. I was thinking the same thing. Diane, what would you think about creating a new position? Chief Brand Officer reporting directly to me, with oversight of marketing, communications, and customer experience? Diane's eyes widened slightly. That's a significant expansion of the role we initially discussed. These are significant times, Thomas replied. We're either going to grow or we're going to fade. There's no middle ground anymore. Philip, ever the financial mind, frowned. The board will have questions about creating a C-suite position out of thin air, especially for someone with her level of experience. Let me worry about the board, Thomas said. Olivia showed us today that she's willing to wade through mud to get where she needs to go. That's the kind of determination we need right now. What if the mud was just a fluke? Diane asked. A strange set of circumstances that made her look more impressive than she really is? Thomas considered this. That's a fair question, which is why I'm not suggesting we just hand her the job based on one muddy interview. He tapped something on his tablet, and a calendar appeared on the display wall. I want to give her a challenge. Something that will either confirm what we saw today or reveal that it was indeed just a fluke. What did you have in mind? Jack asked. The Henderson pitch, Thomas said. The executives exchanged concerned glances. Thomas, Philip said carefully, Henderson Industrial is the biggest potential client we've pursued in years. Their contract would increase our annual revenue by 20%. You want to put that in the hands of someone we just met? Someone who showed up covered in mud? Not alone, Thomas clarified. I want her to lead the pitch team, with all of us supporting her. She'll have 1 week to prepare. 1 week? Diane looked shocked. The pitch is in 10 days. Our team has been working on it for months. Exactly, Thomas said. If she can come in and see what we've been missing, find a way to connect with Henderson that our team hasn't discovered in months of preparation, then we'll know she's the real deal. And if she fails? Jack asked. Then we thank her for her time and continue our search, Thomas said simply. But something tells me she won't fail. Philip still looked skeptical. This is a big risk, Thomas. It is, Thomas agreed. But I've built my career on calculated risks. And right now, the bigger risk is continuing down the same path while our competitors keep eating away at our market share. He looked around the table. Unless anyone has strong objections, I'd like to offer Olivia this challenge first thing tomorrow morning. One by one, the executives nodded their agreement, some more enthusiastically than others. Good, Thomas said, standing up to signal the end of the meeting. Now who's going to call maintenance about the mud on our carpet? As the others laughed and gathered their things, Thomas remained at the window looking out at the city. The storm had passed, leaving everything washed clean and gleaming in the new sunlight. Sometimes, he thought, you need a little rain and mud before things can shine their brightest. His assistant knocked and entered the room. Mr. Reed? I have Olivia Reeves on the phone. She's calling to thank you for the interview and to apologize again for her appearance. Thomas smiled. Tell her there's no need to apologize. And Jennifer? Ask her if she can come in tomorrow morning at 9. Tell her to wear something she doesn't mind getting dirty. At his assistant's puzzled expression, he added, She'll understand. Olivia stared at her closet the next morning, puzzled by the strange request from Thomas Reed's assistant. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty. What kind of job interview involved getting dirty? After yesterday's mud fiasco, she'd spent an hour in a hot shower scrubbing clay from places she didn't know clay could reach. Her interview suit was at the dry cleaners with a note that simply said, "Good luck." And here she was, about to voluntarily put herself in another potentially messy situation. She settled on dark jeans, a navy blouse, and comfortable boots. Professional enough to be taken seriously, casual enough to handle whatever strange test Thomas had devised. This time she arrived 30 minutes early, her car cooperating and the sky clear blue without a rain cloud in sight. The receptionist greeted her with a knowing smile. "Mr. Reed is waiting for you in the garage level. Take the elevator to B2. The garage?" Curiouser and curiouser. When the elevator doors opened on B2, Olivia found not just Thomas but the entire executive team from yesterday, all dressed in similarly casual clothing. Behind them stood about 20 other people she didn't recognize, looking equal parts confused and intrigued. "Ah, Olivia. Right on time," Thomas called out, waving her over. "Everyone, this is Olivia Reeves. Olivia, this is our Henderson pitch team." "Pitch team?" Olivia's stomach fluttered. She'd been expecting another interview, not whatever this was. "Henderson Industrial is the largest manufacturing conglomerate in the Midwest," Thomas explained, addressing everyone. "They're looking to modernize their entire digital infrastructure. Winning their business would be transformative for Innovate Solutions." He turned to Olivia. "Yesterday you impressed us with your fresh perspective and determination. Today I'm offering you a challenge. Lead our pitch team for the Henderson account." Olivia blinked. "Lead the—" "I'm sorry, what?" Diane stepped forward. "The pitch is in 9 days. Our team has been preparing for months, but something's missing. We want you to come in with fresh eyes and help us find a new approach." "I don't even work here yet," Olivia pointed out, her head spinning. "Consider this your final interview," Thomas said with a smile. "If you succeed, we'd like to offer you a position as our new Chief Brand Officer." Chief Brand Officer? That was well beyond the marketing director role she'd applied for. The flutter in her stomach turned into a full swarm of butterflies. "And if I don't succeed?" she asked quietly. "Then we all learned something and you still have a shot at the marketing director position," Thomas replied honestly. "No risk, high potential reward. What do you say?" Olivia looked at the team watching her. Some looked skeptical, others curious. A chance like this wouldn't come along again. "I'm in," she said firmly. "But I still don't understand why we're in a garage or why I needed to wear clothes that can get dirty." Thomas grinned. "Because before you can understand Henderson Industrial, you need to experience what they do. They make construction equipment, automotive parts, industrial machinery. Their employees don't sit in comfortable offices. They build things with their hands. They get dirty." He gestured to a door behind him. "Through there is a team-building workshop our HR department uses. Today we're all going to build something together. Get our hands dirty. Walk in Henderson's shoes." The next 3 hours were unlike anything Olivia had experienced in her professional life. The executive team and pitch team members were divided into groups, each tasked with building a small electric go-kart using parts, tools, and instructions. Suits were replaced by safety goggles, polite conversation by good-natured arguments about which bolt went where. Olivia found herself paired with Philip and 3 members of the tech team. Despite having zero mechanical experience, she discovered she had a knack for reading the instructions and coordinating the different talents in her group. By lunchtime, their go-kart was taking shape, and Olivia's hands were covered in grease and minor cuts. "You know," Philip said as they broke for sandwiches, "I've been working on the Henderson pitch for months, but I never really thought about what it's like to be on their factory floor every day." Olivia nodded, wiping her hands on a rag. "That's the key, isn't it? We need to show them we understand their world, not just their technical requirements." After lunch, Thomas gathered everyone in a conference room where the walls were covered with presentation boards, competitor analyses, and technical specifications. "This is everything we've prepared for the Henderson pitch so far," he explained to Olivia. "The team will walk you through it, and then you have 8 days to help us reshape it into something that will win their business." What followed was a crash course in enterprise software solutions, Henderson's business model and Innovate's capabilities. Olivia took furious notes, asked countless questions, and by 7 that evening her head was swimming with information. As everyone was packing up to leave, Thomas approached her. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" "Slightly," she admitted, "but also exciting. I have some initial thoughts already. I'd like to hear them. Your current approach is all about efficiency and cost saving, which matters, of course. But from what I learned today, Henderson's people take enormous pride in what they build. They're craftspeople at heart, even when using high-tech equipment." Thomas nodded, encouraging her to continue. "What if instead of just promising to make their systems more efficient, we show how our solutions will help their people build even better products, enhance their craftsmanship rather than just speed it up?" A slow smile spread across Thomas's face. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. The conference room is yours for as long as you need it. The team is at your disposal. Make something great." The next 8 days were a blur of activity. Olivia practically lived at Innovate Solutions, working alongside team members who gradually shifted from skepticism to enthusiasm as her vision took shape. The mud-covered interview became a running joke, with someone eventually creating a custom mug that read, "Willing to get dirty for results." On the eve of the presentation, Olivia gathered the core team for a final rehearsal. The pitch they'd created looked nothing like the original. Gone were the abstract diagrams and technical jargon. Instead, they'd built their presentation around the stories of 3 Henderson employees: a factory floor supervisor, a quality control specialist, and a design engineer. They showed how Innovate Solutions would enhance each person's ability to do their best work. "We're not just selling software," Olivia reminded the team. "We're selling pride in craftsmanship. We're selling better work lives. We're selling the feeling of building something that lasts." The morning of the pitch arrived with clear skies and calm nerves. Olivia wore a new suit, charcoal gray rather than navy, a small rebellion against her previous professional uniform. The Henderson executives filed into Innovate's presentation room, 15 stern-faced men and women with decades of manufacturing experience etched into their expressions. Thomas made the introductions, then stepped aside. "Our team is led by Olivia Reeves, our incoming Chief Brand Officer." Incoming, not potential, not candidate. Olivia caught his eye and he gave her the smallest nod. She took a deep breath and began. "At Innovate Solutions, we believe technology should serve the people who use it, not the other way around. To understand how we can best serve Henderson Industrial, we needed to understand your people first." For the next hour, the Henderson executives leaned forward in their seats, nodded, asked engaged questions, and occasionally even laughed. When Olivia concluded, the room fell silent for a moment. Then Henderson's CEO, a woman in her 60s with calloused hands and shrewd eyes, stood up. "I've sat through dozens of these pitches over the years," she said. "This is the first one that showed you actually understand what we do and who we are. We're not looking for vendors. We're looking for partners. And you've just shown us you can be that partner." 3 weeks later, Olivia sat in her new office on the executive floor of Innovate Solutions. The Henderson contract, the largest in the company's history, was framed on her wall. Beside it hung a shadow box containing her mud-stained interview shoes, preserved like a trophy. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Thomas entered, carrying 2 champagne flutes. "To our newest executive," he said, handing her a glass, "and to the power of making a memorable first impression." Olivia laughed. "I still can't believe you offered me the job after I dripped mud all over your conference room." "I didn't offer you the job because you were covered in mud," Thomas corrected. "I offered it because of how you handled being covered in mud. Anyone can look polished when everything goes right. True character shows when things get messy." He glanced at the framed shoes. "The board wants to use your story in our recruiting materials, by the way. At Innovate Solutions, we value determination over perfection. What do you think?" Olivia smiled, thinking of that rainy morning that felt like a lifetime ago. "I think sometimes the worst day of your life can turn into the best opportunity, if you're willing to wade through a little mud to get there." Thomas raised his glass. "To mud, then." "To mud," Olivia agreed. "And to the messy, authentic, perfectly imperfect journeys that lead us where we're meant to be."